Chapter 1. The Storm. The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 angry fists, each drop exploding into fractured light beneath the headlights. Elena Moreau gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, her breath coming. In short, panicked gasps as another contraction rippled through her swollen belly. "Not now," she whispered to the empty car, her voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "Please, not now." The old Honda's engine sputtered, threatening to die, completely as she navigated the winding mountain road. She'd been driving for 3 hours, fleeing the suffocating walls of her apartment in Denver, fleeing the whispered judgments of her neighbors, fleeing the crushing weight of being utterly, completely alone. 26 years old, 7 months, pregnant, and abandoned by everyone who'd ever claimed to love her. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. Elena placed one trembling hand on her stomach, feeling the familiar flutter of movement beneath her palm. At least she wasn't entirely alone. She had this little life growing inside her, this unexpected miracle that had cost her everything else. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time, and she pressed her foot harder on the accelerator. The GPS had died an hour ago, leaving her to navigate by instinct alone through the Colorado wilderness. She'd been heading toward her grandmother's old cabin, the only place left where she might find peace. But the storm had turned the familiar roads into a maze of shadows and uncertainty. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the dense forest that pressed in on both sides of the narrow road. In that brief, stark moment, Elena caught a glimpse of something that made her heart stop. A figure stood in the middle of the road ahead. She slammed on the brakes, feeling the car slide on the rain-slicked asphalt. The Honda spun sideways, tires shrieking against the wet pavement, before coming to rest against a guardrail that groaned ominously under the impact. For a moment, Elena sat in stunned silence, her heart hammering so hard she was certain it would burst. The headlights cut through, the darkness at an odd angle now, illuminating nothing but empty road and driving rain. Had she imagined it? The stress, the exhaustion, the constant worry. Maybe her mind was finally beginning to crack under the pressure. But then she saw him again. He emerged from the tree line like something born from the storm itself, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible in the howling wind. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair plastered to his skull and clothes that clung to a powerful frame. Even through the rain and darkness, she could see the way he moved, predatory, purposeful, as if the storm bent to his will rather than the other way around. Elena's hand shook as she fumbled for her phone, but the screen remained dark. No signal, no help, just her, the baby, and this stranger approaching through the night. He reached her car and tapped on the driver's side window. Elena hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to start the engine and drive away. But when she looked into his face, illuminated by the car's interior light, her breath caught in her throat. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes that seemed to hold depths she couldn't fathom. But there was something else there too, something that made her chest tighten with an inexplicable recognition. Those eyes. Golden brown, almost amber in the strange light. She'd seen them before, in dreams that left her gasping and confused, in half-remembered fragments that felt more like memories than fantasies. Another contraction hit, and Elena doubled over with a cry of pain. When she looked up again, the stranger's expression had changed. The careful neutrality was gone, replaced by something fierce and protective that made her pulse quicken for entirely different reasons. She rolled down the window just enough to speak, rain immediately beginning to spatter her face. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep, rough around the edges, with an accent she couldn't quite place. There was an urgency there that surprised her, as if her well-being mattered to him personally. Another contraction cut off her words, and she gripped the steering wheel again, breathing hard through the pain. His eyes widened, taking in her condition, and something shifted in his expression. "You're in labor." "No," Elena gasped. "Not yet. It's too early. I just need to get to—" "You're not going anywhere in this storm." He glanced at the car, noting the way it sat against the guardrail, the steam beginning to rise from under the hood. "Your engine's overheating, and that guardrail won't hold if the wind gets much stronger." As if summoned by his words, a gust of wind rocked the Honda, and Elena felt it shift slightly against the metal barrier. Fear spiked through her, cold and sharp. "I have a place nearby," the stranger continued, raising his voice above the storm. "You'll be safe there until this passes." Elena stared at him, torn between terror and desperate hope. Everything about this situation screamed danger. The isolated road, the storm, the mysterious man who'd appeared from nowhere. But as another contraction gripped her, stronger and more insistent than the others, she realized she might not have a choice. "I don't even know your name," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Kyle," he said finally. Kyle Blackwood. The name hit her like a physical blow, resonating through her bones in a way that made no sense. She'd never heard it before, she was certain of that. But it felt familiar on her tongue when she whispered it back to him. "Kale." His eyes flashed, and for just a moment she could have sworn they glowed in the darkness. But then another contraction seized her, and she was too busy breathing through the pain to wonder about tricks of light and shadow. When she could speak again, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Elena," she managed. "Elena Moreau." "Elena." He said her name like a prayer, like an answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "We need to go. Now." The wind howled around them, and Elena felt the car shift again against the failing guardrail. She looked at Kale, this stranger, who somehow didn't feel like a stranger, and made a choice that would change everything. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." He moved with startling efficiency, helping her from the car and supporting her weight as they made their way through the storm. His body was warm against hers, solid and reassuring, and she found herself leaning into his strength as the wind tried to tear them apart. They walked, or rather he carried her, through the forest along what must have been a hidden path. Elena lost track of time, focused only on putting one foot in front of the other, and breathing through the contractions that were coming faster now, more intense. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, they emerged into a clearing, where a cabin sat like something from a fairy tale. Warm light spilled from the windows, and smoke rose from the chimney despite the storm. It looked like sanctuary, like the home she'd been searching for without knowing it. Kale swept her up, into his arms without warning, carrying her across the threshold with a gentleness that belied his obvious strength. The interior was warm and inviting, all stone and wood and comfortable furniture arranged around a massive fireplace. "You'll be safe here," he said, settling her onto a leather couch that smelled of cedar and something else. Something wild and earthy that made her think of moonlight and running water. Elena looked up at him, this man who'd appeared from the storm like an answer to her prayers, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not just gratitude, though she felt that too. Something deeper, more primitive, recognition. "Thank you," she whispered. But the words felt inadequate for what he'd done, for what he was still doing as he moved around the cabin, building up the fire, fetching blankets and water. He paused in his movements, those strange golden eyes finding hers across the room. "You don't need to thank me, Elena. Not for this." There was something in his voice, something that suggested this was about more than simple kindness to a stranger. But before she could ask what he meant, another contraction hit, and she realized with growing certainty that her baby had no intention of waiting for the storm to pass. As if sensing her thoughts, Kale was beside her in an instant, his hand gentle on her forehead. "It's going to be okay," he said, and somehow, impossibly, she believed him. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cabin, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. She was no longer alone in the darkness, no longer facing the unknown without help. She didn't know yet that the man who'd saved her carried secrets that would shatter everything she thought she knew about the world. She didn't know that the baby growing inside her was the key to a destiny neither of them could have imagined. All she knew was that for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she felt safe, protected, as if she'd finally found the place, and the person she was meant to be with. The storm would pass, but the real tempest was just beginning. Chapter 2. Sanctuary and Secrets. The contractions came in waves now, each one stealing Elena's breath and making her grip the soft leather of the couch until her knuckles went white. Through the haze of pain and fear, she was dimly aware of Cale, moving around the cabin with quiet efficiency, checking locks, closing curtains, building the fire higher until the room glowed with warmth. "How far apart?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. His voice was steady, but she caught the tension underneath, the careful control that suggested he was more affected by her condition than he wanted to let on. Elena glanced at the antique clock on the mantel, trying to focus through another wave of pain. Maybe 10 minutes? Sometimes less. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby shift restlessly inside her. "It's too early. I'm only 7 months." Something flickered across Cale's features. Concern, she thought, but there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Babies come when they're ready," he said gently. "Not when we think they should." There was an odd certainty in his voice, as if he'd witnessed this before. Elena studied his face in the firelight, noting the strong lines of his jaw, the way shadows played across his cheekbones. He couldn't be much older than she was. 30, maybe 32. But there was an ageless quality to his eyes, as if he'd seen more than his years should allow. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, hoping against hope that fate had delivered her not just shelter, but medical help. Cale's mouth quirked, in what might have been a smile. "Not exactly, but I've helped bring new life into the world before." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and she found herself caught by the intensity of his gaze. "Tell me about the father." The question hit her like a physical blow, and Elena turned away, staring into the dancing flames of the fire. "There's nothing to tell." "Elena." Her name on his lips was soft, coaxing. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Something in his voice, the gentleness, the understanding, broke through the walls she'd spent months building around her heart. The words came tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't even know his real name." The admission burned, her throat. "I met him at a conference in Denver. He said he was there on business, that his name was Marcus. We spent 3 days together. And I thought..." She laughed bitterly. "I thought it meant something. That I meant something to him." Cale's hands clenched into fists on his knees, and she caught a glimpse of something dangerous flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. "When I realized I was pregnant, I tried to find him. The hotel had no record of anyone by that name. The business card he gave me led to a dead end. It was like he'd never existed at all." Elena wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "My parents, they said I brought shame on the family, that I was a fool for trusting a stranger. They cut me off completely." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the storm still raging outside. When Elena finally looked up, she found Kyle watching her, with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pain, anger, and something that looked almost like guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You deserved better than that. From all of them, Another contraction seized her, stronger than the others, and Elena doubled over with a cry. Instantly, Cale was beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders as he helped her breathe through the pain. "That's it," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "Just breathe, in and out. Let it pass." His touch was warm, almost burning against her skin, and Elena found herself leaning into his strength. There was something about his presence that calmed the wild panic in her chest, something that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't experienced in months. "How do you know what to do?" she gasped as the contraction faded. Cale's hand stilled on her shoulders. "My mother," he said after a long moment. "She was a midwife, taught me that birth is natural, sacred, nothing to be feared." Was. Past tense. Elena heard the grief hidden in those simple words and felt an answering ache in her chest. "I'm sorry for your loss." It was a long time ago, but his voice suggested the wound was still tender. "She would have liked you." The simple statement hit her harder than it should have. Here was this man, this stranger who'd saved her from the storm, talking about her as if she mattered, as if she belonged somewhere in his life. It was more kindness than she'd received in months. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Cale's hands moved to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away fresh tears. "I know you're brave. I know you've been carrying this burden alone when you shouldn't have to. I know you're stronger than you realize." Elena stared into those golden eyes, feeling something shift and settle in her chest. The attraction she'd felt from the moment she saw him was still there, but it was deeper now, more complex. This wasn't just physical desire, though that was certainly present, humming between them like electricity. This was recognition on a soul-deep level, as if some part of her had been waiting her entire life for this moment. This man. "Cale," she began, but another contraction cut off her words. This one was different. Longer, more intense, with pressure that made her gasp. "That was only 5 minutes," Cale said, checking the clock. His jaw tightened. "We need to get you more comfortable. Can you walk?" Elena nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. Cale helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as they made their way down a short hallway. The bedroom he led her to was simple, but comfortable, dominated by a large bed covered in soft quilts that looked handmade. "This is beautiful," Elena said, running her fingers over the intricate stitching of the nearest quilt. The pattern was unusual, geometric shapes that seemed to shift and flow in the lamplight, almost like they were alive. "My grandmother's work," Cale said, pulling back the covers. She believed in putting protection into everything she made. Protection. There was that word again, and something about the way he said it made Elena's skin prickle with awareness. She studied his profile as he fussed with the pillows, noting the sharp angles of his face, the way he moved with that same fluid grace she'd observed in the storm. "Cale," she said slowly, "what do you do? For work, I mean." He went very still, his hands freezing on the quilts. "I manage land for my family. We own property throughout this area." It wasn't exactly a lie, Elena sensed, but it wasn't the whole truth either. There were layers to this man, secrets that ran deeper than simple privacy. And yet, she found she didn't care. Whatever he was hiding, whoever he really was, he'd saved her when she needed it most. Another contraction hit, and this time Elena couldn't stifle her cry of pain. Cale was beside her instantly, his hands steady and sure as he helped her onto the bed. "It's getting closer," she panted. "The baby's really coming." "Yes," Cale said simply. "It is." There was something in his voice. Anticipation, maybe, or destiny. As if he'd been waiting for this moment as long as she had, though she couldn't imagine why. Outside, lightning split the sky, And in the brief illumination that flooded the room, Elena could have sworn she saw Cale's eyes flash gold. Not brown, not amber, but pure molten gold like coins in sunlight. But then the moment passed, and she was too lost in the rhythm of her own body to wonder about tricks of light and shadow. All that mattered now was the life trying to enter the world, and the man beside her whose presence made everything feel possible. "Stay with me," she whispered, reaching for his hand. Cale's fingers intertwined with hers, warm and strong and steady. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, and something in his voice suggested he meant far more than just tonight. The storm raged on outside, but here in this sanctuary he'd created, Elena felt a peace she hadn't known in months. Whatever happened next, whatever secrets lay between them, she was no longer facing the unknown alone, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 3. The Deepening Bond. The hours passed in a blur of pain and waiting, the storm outside mirroring the tempest within Elena's body. Kyle never left her side, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos of labor. He brought her water, helped her change positions, and spoke in low, soothing tones that seemed to calm not just her, but the very air around them. "Tell me about your grandmother," Elena said during a brief respite between contractions, desperate for distraction. She was lying on her side now, Cale's hand resting protectively on her hip. "She was extraordinary," Cale said, his voice soft with memory. "She knew things. About the land, about people, about the old ways that most have forgotten." His thumb traced gentle circles on her skin through the fabric of her dress. "She taught me that some bonds transcend the physical world, that souls recognize each other across time and space." Elena turned to study his face, noting the way the firelight cast shadows across his features. "You talk about her like she was magical." Something flickered in Cale's expression, caution perhaps, or the careful weighing of words. "She was wise," he said finally. "She understood that there are forces in this world that can't be explained by science or logic." Before Elena could ask what he meant, another contraction seized her, stronger than any before. She cried out, her body arching as the pain crashed over her in waves. Cale's hands were immediately there, one on her back, the other cradling her face. "Breathe," he murmured, his voice carrying an odd resonance that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "Let your body do what it knows how to do." There was something in his touch, something that went beyond mere comfort. The pain was still there, but it felt manageable somehow, as if his presence was lending her strength she didn't know she possessed. "How are you doing that?" Elena gasped as the contraction faded. Cale's hand stilled on her cheek. "Doing what?" "Making it better. The pain, it's still there, but when you touch me, I can handle it." For a long moment, Cale didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Sometimes people just fit together, complement each other's energy." Elena wanted to press him on that cryptic statement, but another wave of pain crashed over her, and she found herself reaching instinctively for his hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, the agony became bearable again, as if his touch was a conduit for some deeper strength. "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was true. Whatever was happening between them, it was beyond anything she'd experienced before. "Is it?" Cale's golden eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something, ancient and knowing in their depths. "Elena, what do you remember about the night your baby was conceived?" The question caught her off guard, and she found herself thinking back to those 3 days in Denver. The conference, the hotel bar where she'd met the mysterious Marcus, the way he'd looked at her as if she was the only woman in the world. "I remember intensity," she said slowly. like nothing I'd ever felt before. He was so focused on me, so present, and there was something about his eyes. She trailed off, a strange chill running down her spine. What about his eyes? Cale's voice was very quiet now, very careful. They were gold, Elena whispered, the memory crystallizing with startling clarity. Not brown or hazel, but actually gold, like yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Cale's hand tightened on hers, and she could feel the tension radiating from his body like heat from a flame. "Kyle," she said carefully, "what aren't you telling me?" Before he could answer, a sound from outside made them both freeze. It wasn't the wind or the storm, it was something else. Something that made the hair on Elena's arms stand on end. Howl, long and haunting, that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Cale was on his feet in an instant, his entire body going rigid with alertness. "Stay here," he said, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "What was that?" Elena struggled to sit up, fear spiking through her chest. "Just the wind," Cale said, but his eyes were fixed on the darkened window, and Elena could see the lie in the tension of his shoulders. Another howl answered the first, closer this time, and Elena felt the baby kick hard against her ribs as if responding to some primal alarm. "That's not wind," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Cale moved to the window, peering out into the storm-lashed darkness. When he turned back to her, his expression was grim. "There are wild animals in these mountains. They're probably just sheltering from the storm." But even as he spoke, Elena could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, calculations and concerns that went far beyond simple wildlife. Whatever was out there, it meant something to him, something important, and possibly dangerous. "Cale, I need you to be honest with me." Elena's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "What's really going on here?" For a moment, she thought he might deflect again, might offer another half-truth or evasion, but then his shoulders sagged slightly, and she saw something crack in his carefully maintained composure. "There are things about this world," he said slowly. "About the mountains, about certain families who've lived here for generations, that most people don't understand. My family, we're part of something older than the towns and cities. Something that exists in the spaces between the modern world and the wild places that still remember the old ways." Elena stared at him, trying to process what he was telling her. "You're talking about what, exactly?" "I'm talking about the fact that some people aren't entirely human," Cale said quietly. "That there are those who can shift between forms, who are bound to the cycles of the moon and the call of the pack." The words hit Elena like a physical blow, and she found herself thinking of every strange detail she'd noticed about him. The way he moved, the flash of gold in his eyes, the howls outside that had made him so tense. "You're saying you're a werewolf," she said, the words feeling surreal on her tongue. Cale's jaw tightened. "I'm saying I'm something more than what I appear to be. And I'm saying that the man you knew as Marcus, he might have been something more as well." Another contraction chose that moment to strike, and Elena doubled over with a cry that was part pain, part shock. The implications of what Cale was telling her crashed over her like a tidal wave. If he was right, if the father of her baby was some kind of supernatural being, then what did that make her child? "Elena." Cale was beside her again, his hands steady and warm on her shoulders. "I know this is overwhelming, but the baby," she gasped, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "If what you're saying is true, if Marcus was like you, then what's happening to my baby?" Cale's expression softened, and he cupped her face gently in his hands. "Your baby is going to be perfect," he said firmly. "Different, maybe, but perfect. And I swear to you, Elena, I will protect both of you with my life." There was such conviction in his voice, such fierce protectiveness, that Elena felt some of her panic subside, but questions still swirled in her mind, fragments of memory and possibility that she couldn't quite piece together. "Is that why you found me?" she asked. "In the storm, I mean. Was it coincidence or—" "There are no coincidences," Cale said softly. "Not when it comes to matters of the heart, or matters of fate." Before Elena could ask what he meant by that, another howl split the night, and this time it was answered by several others. The sound was closer now, circling the cabin like predators sensing prey. Cale's head snapped toward the window, and Elena saw his nostrils flare as if he was scenting the air. "We need to move you to the interior room," he said urgently. "Away from the windows." "Why?" Elena struggled to stand, her heart hammering with fear. "What's out there?" Cale's eyes met hers, and in their golden depths, she saw a truth that made her blood run cold. "My pack," he said simply, "and they're not happy that I've brought a human into our territory." Chapter 4. Pack Politics and Painful Truths. The howls grew closer, circling the cabin like a noose tightening around prey. Elena gripped Cale's arm as another contraction seized her, the pain now mixed with terror for her unborn child. "They won't hurt you," Kyle said, but his voice carried an uncertainty that made her stomach clench. "You're under my protection." "And what if they don't care about your protection?" Elena gasped as the contraction faded. "What if they think I'm a threat?" Cale's jaw tightened, and she saw him glance toward what looked like a gun cabinet in the corner of the room. "Then I'll remind them why I'm their alpha." Alpha. The word hit Elena like a physical blow, and suddenly so many things made sense. His commanding presence, the way he'd taken charge in the storm, the authority in his voice when he'd told her to stay put. "You're their leader," she whispered. "I am." Cale helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they moved toward the inner hallway, which means my word is law. But pack dynamics are complex when it comes to outsiders. They made it to a small windowless room that seemed to serve as a study. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that looked ancient, their leather bindings worn smooth by countless hands. Elena caught glimpses of titles that made her skin prickle. Lunar cycles and transformation, the sacred bond of mates, bloodlines of the Northern Territories. "Sit," Cale said, guiding her to a comfortable chair. "I need to go speak with them." "No." Elena grabbed his wrist, fear spiking through her chest. "Don't leave me alone. Please." Cale's expression softened, and he knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Elena, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to tell, it's going to sound impossible." Another howl split the night, and this time it was accompanied by the sound of something large moving on the cabin's porch. Elena's grip on Cale's hands tightened. "The man you knew as Marcus," Cale said, quietly. "He was pack, like me. But he wasn't from around here. He was a lone wolf, an outcast from another territory." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "How do you know that?" "Because 3 months ago he came to me, seeking sanctuary." Cale's golden eyes met hers, and she saw pain there and guilt. "He told me about a woman he'd met, a woman carrying his child. He said he'd made a mistake, that he'd gotten involved with a human without meaning to, and now he was being hunted by his former pack for breaking their laws." The world seemed to tilt around Elena, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. He came to you? About me?" "He was terrified," Cale continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Not of his former pack, but of what his child might become. Mixed bloodlines are rare, Elena. The children of werewolf and human unions are powerful, And that power can be dangerous if it's not properly guided. Elena stared at him, trying to process what he was telling her. Where is he now? Marcus, I mean. If he came to you, he's dead. The words fell between them like stones. His former pack found him before I could offer him proper protection. They killed him for the crime of loving a human. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena felt tears streaming down her face, though she wasn't sure if they were for Marcus, for herself, or for the child she carried who would never know its father. I'm sorry, Cale said softly. I'm so sorry, Elena. I should have found you sooner, should have protected you both. How could you have known? Elena whispered. You didn't even know I existed. But I did. Cale's hands tightened on hers. Marcus described you perfectly. Your dark hair, your green eyes, the way you laughed. He was obsessed with finding you. Again, with making things right. And when you appeared on that road tonight, in the middle of the storm, I knew exactly who you were. Elena felt the world shifting around her, reality rearranging itself into patterns she'd never imagined. That's why you helped me. Not because you're a good person, but because you felt guilty about what happened to Marcus. No. Kyle's voice was fierce, and he moved closer, his hands framing her face. At first, maybe. But Elena, the moment I touched you, the moment I heard you say my name, everything changed. Before she could ask what he meant, a heavy thud against the front door made them both freeze. The howling had stopped, replaced by something far more ominous. Silence. Kyle. A voice called from outside, rough and commanding. We know she's in there. Bring her out. Kyle was on his feet in an instant, his entire body radiating tension. Stay here, he ordered, moving toward the door of the study. No matter what you hear, don't come out. Kale, wait. But he was already gone, and Elena heard his footsteps echo through the cabin toward the front door. She pressed her ear to the study door, straining to hear the conversation that followed. Voices, low and urgent, speaking in tones that carried the weight of ancient authority and barely contained violence. Brought a human to sacred ground. Violation of pack law. The child she carries is an abomination. Elena's blood ran cold at that last phrase, and she instinctively placed her hands over her swollen belly. Whatever was growing inside her, these creatures, these people, saw it as a threat. Enough. Kyle's voice cut through the other voices like a blade. She is under my protection, and she stays until the birth is complete. You forget yourself. Alpha. The rough voice from before spoke again, and Elena caught the subtle challenge in the words. The pack comes before any individual, even you. The pack follows my lead, Cale replied, steel in his voice. And I say she stays. A new voice joined the conversation, older, more measured. Cale, be reasonable. The child is half-blood. It belongs with neither world fully. What kind of life can you offer it here? A safe one, Kyle said without hesitation. Which is more than it will have if you cast it out into the human world with no guidance, no protection. Elena's heart clenched at the conviction in his voice. Here was a man, a creature, who barely knew her, yet he was willing to fight his own people for her and her unborn child. And what of the mother? Another voice, younger, sharper. She's seen too much already. She knows what we are. That's not your concern, Kyle said, but Elena heard the warning in his tone. Isn't it? The young voice pressed. Pack law is clear about humans who learn our secrets. They either join us completely or they die. The older voice finished the sentence with grim finality. Elena's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor of the study, her heart hammering so hard she was certain it would burst. They were talking about killing her. These creatures, these werewolves, were calmly discussing ending her life to protect their secrets. But then Kale's voice rose, above the others, carrying an authority that made the walls of the cabin seem to vibrate. "Anyone who touches her answers to me personally," he said. And there was something in his tone that was no longer entirely human. "I am alpha of this pack, chosen by blood and right. My word is law, and my protection is absolute. Even for a human." The challenging voice again, pushing boundaries, especially for this human. Kale's response was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "She carries the child of a wolf. That makes her family, and family is protected above all else." Elena closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She was trapped between two worlds, human and supernatural, with nowhere to run and a child who belonged fully to neither. But in the midst of her terror, she felt something else. Gratitude for the man who stood between her and the pack's judgment, risking everything to keep her safe. Another contraction seized her then, stronger than any before, and she couldn't stifle her cry of pain. The sound echoed through the cabin, and the voices outside immediately fell silent. When Kale spoke again, his voice was tight with concern. "The birth is starting. Everyone out. Now, we're not finished discussing this," the older voice warned. "Yes," Kale said firmly. "We are. For tonight, we are." Elena heard footsteps retreating, followed by the sound of the front door closing. But she could still sense them out there, waiting in the darkness like wolves circling wounded prey. When Kale appeared in the doorway of the study, his face was grim but determined. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Elena admitted, accepting his help to stand. "They want to kill me." "They want to protect the pack," Kale corrected gently. "But I won't let them hurt you, I promise." As another contraction gripped her, Elena looked into his golden eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Not just protectiveness, not just duty, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like... "Kale," she whispered, as the pain faded. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just because of Marcus." For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she had to strain to hear it. "Because the moment I saw you, I knew," he said simply. "You're not just carrying a wolf's child, Elena. You're my mate, and I've been waiting my entire life for you." Chapter 5. The claiming Elena stared at Kyle, his words echoing in the silence between them like thunder after lightning. Mate. The word carried weight beyond its simple definition, implications that made her skin prickle with awareness and fear in equal measure. "That's impossible," she whispered, even as her body betrayed her, leaning instinctively toward his warmth. "I was with Marcus. I'm carrying his child." "Biology doesn't determine fate," Kale said, his voice gentle but certain. "Marcus may have fathered your child, but that doesn't change what you are to me, what we are to each other." Another contraction seized her, and Kale's hands were immediately there, steadying her through the pain. But this time, Elena felt something different in his touch, a deeper connection, as if invisible threads were binding them together with each passing moment. "I don't understand any of this," she gasped as the pain receded. "Mates, werewolves, pack law. Yesterday I was just a pregnant woman trying to find somewhere to have her baby in peace. And now you're the most important person in my world," Kyle said quietly, helping her back to the bedroom. "I know it's overwhelming, Elena. I know this isn't what you planned, but fate rarely asks for our permission." They moved slowly down the hallway, Elena leaning heavily on Kyle's strength. The cabin felt different now, charged with an energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Outside, she could sense the pack still waiting, their presence, like pressure against her skin. "What does it mean?" she asked as they reached the bedroom. "Being mates, I mean. In your world." Kale's hands stilled on her shoulders, and she saw something vulnerable flicker across his features. "It means you're my other half. The piece of my soul I've been missing without knowing it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It means I would die before I let anything happen to you. That your happiness matters more to me than my own life." The intensity in his voice made Elena's breath catch. She'd known him for less than 12 hours, yet something deep inside her recognized the truth of his words. The connection she felt to him went beyond attraction, beyond gratitude for his help. It was primal, inevitable, like gravity. "But I'm human," she said, the words feeling inadequate even as she spoke them. "Mate bonds don't recognize species," Kyle replied, sitting on the edge of the bed beside her. "They recognize souls, and yours calls to mine in ways I never thought possible." Before Elena could respond, another contraction hit. Stronger, longer, with a pressure that made her cry out. Kyle's hands found hers immediately, and the moment their skin touched, the pain became manageable again. "How do you do that?" She panted, staring at their intertwined fingers. "The mate bond," Kyle explained, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "It allows us to share strength, to ease each other's pain. The connection deepens over time, but even now." He trailed off, and Elena saw him swallow hard, as if the sensation of their bond was affecting him as much as it was her. "This is crazy," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew she didn't want him to let go. "Crazy," Kale agreed with a small smile. "But not unwelcome. At least I hope not." Elena studied his face in the lamplight, noting the way shadows played across his strong features. There was something almost ethereal about him, something that spoke of moonlight and wild places and ancient magic. But there was also kindness there, and a gentleness that made her heart ache. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "of the birth, of your pack, of everything that's happening. But when you touch me, I feel safe, like maybe everything will be okay." Kale's eyes darkened with emotion, and he leaned closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Everything will be okay," he said fiercely. "I swear it to you, Elena. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to sacrifice, you and your child will be protected." The conviction in his voice was absolute, and Elena found herself believing him despite the impossibility of their situation. Here was a man, an alpha werewolf, who barely knew her, yet he was willing to defy his entire pack for her safety. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you willing to risk so much for someone you just met?" Kale's hand moved to the base of her throat, his fingers resting over her pulse point. "Because you're not someone I just met," he said quietly. "You're the woman I've been dreaming about for years, the face I've seen in visions, the voice I've heard calling to me across impossible distances." Elena's eyes widened. "That's not possible. Isn't it?" Kale's fingers traced the rapid flutter of her pulse. "Haven't you felt it too? The recognition, the sense that this moment was always coming?" She wanted to deny it, but the truth was written in her racing heart. From the moment she'd seen him standing in the storm, she'd felt a connection that defied explanation. And now, feeling the warmth of his touch, breathing in his scent of cedar and wild things, she couldn't pretend anymore. "I have dreams," she whispered, "about golden eyes and moonlight and someone calling my name. I've had them for months, since the night I conceived." Kale's breath caught, and she saw something fierce and triumphant flash in his eyes. "The bond began forming the moment your child was conceived," he said. "Werewolf children are connected to the pack through their bloodline. Your baby called to me across the miles, and I've been searching for you ever since." Another contraction gripped her, And this time Elena didn't fight the sensation of Kale's strength flowing into her. She let herself lean into the connection, marveling at how right it felt despite everything she'd believed about the world just hours before. "The baby," she gasped as the pain faded. "Will it be like you?" "I don't know," Kale admitted. "Mixed bloodlines are rare. Your child might shift, or they might remain human with enhanced abilities. But whatever they are, they'll be loved. By you, by me, by the pack once they accept what's happening here." "And if they don't accept it?" Kale's expression hardened. "Then I'll start a new pack. One that understands that love transcends species, that family isn't defined by blood alone." The casual way he spoke of upending his entire life for her and her child left Elena speechless. She stared at him. This man who'd appeared from a storm like something from a fairy tale, and felt her last defenses crumble. "Kyle," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. "I need you to know something. Before this goes any further, before I let myself believe in fairy tales and fated mates." "What?" "I've been hurt before. Abandoned. I won't survive that again. So if there's any part of you that's uncertain about this, about us, I need you to tell me now." Kale turned his head to press a gentle kiss to her palm, his eyes never leaving hers. "Elena Moreau," he said solemnly, "I have waited 32 years to find my mate. I have endured loneliness and duty, and the weight of leading a pack while feeling like half of my soul was missing. Now that I've found you, now that I know what it feels like to be complete, nothing in this world or any other could make me walk away from you." The sincerity in his voice broke something open in Elena's chest, and she felt tears streaming down her face. Not tears of pain or fear, but of relief so profound it left her breathless. "I believe you," she whispered. Before Kale could respond, another contraction hit, the strongest yet, with a pressure that made Elena cry out in earnest. This time, the pain didn't fade as quickly, and she realized with growing certainty that her baby was ready to enter the world. "It's time," she gasped, gripping Kale's hand so tightly her knuckles went white. Kale's expression shifted into focus, and Elena saw the alpha emerge, calm, competent, absolutely in control. "I'm here," he said firmly. "We're going to do this. Together. And everything is going to be perfect." Outside, a howl rose on the wind, not threatening this time, but somehow expectant, as if the pack could sense that something momentous was about to happen. Elena looked into Kale's golden eyes and felt a strange sense of rightness settle over her. She was about to bring a child into a world she didn't understand, surrounded by creatures she'd never believed existed. But she wasn't alone. She had found her mate, her protector, her other half. And for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Elena wasn't afraid of what came next. Chapter: The Birth of Destiny. The contractions came faster now, each one building on the last until Elena lost track of time entirely. The world narrowed to Kale's steady presence beside her, his hands anchoring her to reality as waves of pain and pressure crashed over her body. "Breathe with me," he murmured, his voice carrying that strange resonance that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "In and out. Let your body do what it was designed to do." Elena gripped his hand, marveling at how his touch continued to ease the worst of the pain. The mate bond, he'd called it, but it felt like magic, pure and simple and absolutely impossible, by any rational measure. "I can see the head," Kale said, his voice tight with emotion. "Elena, your baby is coming." She pushed, bearing down with everything she had, and felt something shift deep inside her. The pressure was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else. A strange tingling sensation, as if electricity was dancing along her nerve endings. "Something's wrong," She gasped between contractions. I feel different, like there's energy building inside me. Kale's eyes met hers, and she saw understanding flash in their golden depths. It's not wrong, he said gently. The baby is awakening something in you. Mixed bloodline children often trigger latent abilities in their human parents. Abilities? Elena stared at him, fear spiking through her chest. What kind of abilities? Before Kale could answer, another contraction seized her, and this time, the tingling sensation exploded into something more. Elena cried out as power rushed through her veins, hot, wild, intoxicating. For a moment, her vision sharpened until she could see every detail of the room with startling clarity. She could hear the pack members outside, their heartbeats rapid, with anticipation. She could smell the storm on the wind, the scent of pine and earth, and something indefinably wild. Elena. Kale's voice was urgent now. Look at me. Stay with me. She focused on his face, using it as an anchor as the power surged and receded like a tide. What's happening to me? Your child is part wolf, Kyle explained, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. That connection is awakening dormant abilities in your bloodline. Many humans carry traces of supernatural heritage they don't know about. Elena wanted to ask more, but another wave of pressure demanded her attention. She pushed again, and this time she felt the baby crown. Felt the impossible moment when new life prepared to enter the world. One more push, Kale said, and there was wonder in his voice. Elena, one more and your baby will be here. She bore down with everything she had, feeling the power inside her surge again as if it were helping, lending her strength she didn't know she possessed. And then, in a rush of sensation and relief, her baby slipped free. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena lay back against the pillows, breathing hard, waiting for the sound that would tell her everything was okay. But no cry came. Kale? She whispered, panic beginning to claw at her chest. She's perfect, he said softly, and Elena heard the awe in his voice. Elena, your daughter is absolutely perfect. Daughter. Elena struggled to sit up, desperate to see her child. When Kale placed the baby in her arms, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The infant was beautiful, small but perfectly formed, with a cap of dark hair and skin that seemed to glow with an inner light. But it was her eyes that made Elena's heart stop. They were open, alert, and utterly impossible. One eye was the deep green of Elena's own. The other was pure gold, like molten metal in sunlight. Her eyes, Elena whispered, touching her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers. Mark of a mixed bloodline, Kale said gently. She carries both worlds within her. Human intuition and wolf instinct, mortal wisdom and supernatural power. As if responding to their voices, the baby turned her head toward Kale, and Elena felt her breath catch. There was intelligence in that tiny face, awareness that seemed far beyond what any newborn should possess. Hello, little one, Kale murmured, extending one finger toward the baby's hand. Welcome to the world. The infant's fingers closed around his with surprising strength, and the moment their skin touched, Elena felt the mate bond flare between them like a struck match. But this time, it included the baby, a three-way connection that hummed with possibility and power. She knows you, Elena said wonderingly. She recognizes you. Children of mixed blood are born with enhanced awareness, Kyle explained, his voice soft with reverence. She can sense the mate bond between us. In her eyes, we're already family. Before Elena could respond, a sound from outside made them both freeze. It wasn't howling this time. It was something far more ominous. Footsteps, deliberate and heavy, approaching the cabin. They're coming, Kale said, his entire body going rigid with tension. Now? Elena clutched her daughter closer to her chest. She was just born. Surely they wouldn't. A sharp knock at the front door cut off her words. The sound was too controlled, too human, and somehow that made it more frightening than any howl. Cale. The voice that followed was the older one. From before, the one that had spoken of pack law and necessary sacrifices. We need to see the child. Cale moved to stand between Elena and the bedroom door, his shoulders squared for battle. She needs rest. Both of them do. The pack has waited long enough, came the reply. The child's nature must be determined before decisions can be made about their future. Elena felt ice form in her veins. They want to take her, she whispered. Over my dead body, Cale said, and there was something in his voice that was no longer entirely human. She's under my protection. They all are. Even you cannot protect them if the child proves to be a threat to pack security. The voice outside continued. Open the door, Cale, or we will open it ourselves. The baby stirred in Elena's arms, and for a moment, her mismatched eyes seemed to glow with their own light. Elena felt another surge of that strange power course through her. Stronger this time, more focused. She looked down at her daughter and saw not weakness to be protected, but strength that would reshape everything. What are you not telling me? She asked Cale quietly. About children like her, I mean. Why are they so afraid? Cale's jaw tightened. Because mixed bloodline children are rare and powerful. They can do things that pure werewolves cannot. Bridge the gap between human and supernatural worlds, command loyalty from both species, reshape the very foundations of pack law. They think she's a threat to their way of life. Yes. But Elena... Cale turned to look at her, and she saw something fierce and protective burning in his eyes. They're also terrified she might be their salvation. Prophecies speak of a child born between worlds, one who will unite the scattered packs and lead them into a new age. Elena stared down at her daughter, this tiny being who seemed to hold the weight of destiny in her small hands. And you think she might be that child? I think, Kyle said carefully, that the moment she was conceived, the supernatural world began to change. And now that she's here... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Elena could feel it herself. The shift in the air, the sense that something fundamental had altered in the fabric of reality. Her daughter was special, marked by fate for purposes neither of them could fully understand. Another knock at the door, more insistent this time. We're coming, Elena said suddenly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Cale spun to face her. Elena, no, it's too dangerous. Running is what got me into this situation in the first place, Elena replied, carefully adjusting her daughter in her arms. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of hiding. If they want to meet her, then they'll meet her. But they'll also meet me. She stood on unsteady legs, the power inside her lending her stability. Cale moved to support her, but she could see the conflict. In his eyes, pride at her courage warring with terror for her safety. If I'm truly your mate, Elena said softly, then trust me. Trust that I can face whatever comes next. Cale searched her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together, he said firmly. We face this together. As they moved toward the bedroom door, Elena felt her daughter's tiny hand curl against her chest, and she could have sworn she heard a sound like a contented sigh. Whatever waited beyond that door, whatever judgment the pack intended to pass, they would meet it as a family. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and dangerous, but no longer empty. Elena had found her mate, given birth to a child of prophecy and discovered powers she'd never dreamed possible. Now it was time to see if the world was ready for what they'd become. Chapter 7. the pack's judgment. Elena's legs trembled as they approached the front door, but she forced herself to stand tall. Her daughter rested peacefully in her arms, those extraordinary mismatched eyes alert and watchful, as if she too understood the gravity of this moment. Cale's hand found the small of Elena's back, offering silent support. She could feel the tension radiating from him, the careful control of a predator preparing for battle. "Remember," he murmured in her ear, "I am Alpha. Whatever they say, whatever they demand, my word is final." Elena nodded, though she wondered if that would be enough. From the conversations she'd overheard, it was clear that some pack members questioned Cale's authority when it came to her and her daughter. Cale opened the door, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. 5 figures stood on the porch, and even, in their human forms, there was something undeniably otherworldly about them. They moved with the same fluid grace she'd noticed in Cale, their eyes reflecting the porch light with an inner gleam that spoke of wild things and moonlit hunts. The eldest was a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like winter storms. She stepped forward, her gaze immediately fixing on the baby in Elena's arms. "So," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "this is the child that has caused such discussion." "This is my daughter," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "And she's not a topic for discussion." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly, and Elena caught a flicker of what might have been approval in her expression. "Bold words for a human who knows nothing of our ways." "Then teach me," Elena replied. "But don't expect me to stand by while you debate my child's right to exist." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Elena could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the way each pack member assessed her with senses beyond human understanding, but she held her ground, her daughter warm and solid in her arms. "May I see her?" the elder woman asked, her tone shifting slightly. Not demanding now, but requesting. Elena hesitated, every maternal instinct screaming at her to refuse. But Cale's hand pressed gently against her back, and she found courage in his touch. "You can look," Elena said carefully. "But you don't touch her without my permission." The woman stepped closer, and Elena caught her scent. Pine and earth, and something wild that made her newly awakened senses tingle. When the elder's gaze fell on the baby's face, Elena heard her sharp intake of breath. "The eyes," the woman whispered. "One from each world." "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Elena said softly, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "She's—" The elder woman paused, searching for words. "She's exactly what the old stories described. The child born between worlds, marked by both moon and sun." Another pack member, a younger man with dark hair and suspicious eyes, stepped forward. "Stories are just stories, Vera. This child is an anomaly, a genetic quirk. She's not some prophesied savior." "Isn't she, Derek?" Vera's voice carried a quiet authority that made the younger man step back. "Can you not feel it? The way the very air changed when she drew her first breath?" Elena looked between them, trying to understand the undercurrents of the conversation. "What stories?" she asked. Vera's ancient eyes met hers. "Legends passed, down through generations of our kind. They speak of a time when the supernatural world will face its greatest threat and its greatest hope. A child born of 2 worlds who will either unite our scattered people or watch them fall to extinction." "That's a lot of pressure for a baby who's barely an hour old," Elena said, unconsciously tightening her hold on her daughter. "Prophecies rarely concern themselves with convenience," Vera replied with a slight smile. "But they do concern themselves with necessity. And these are dangerous times for our kind, child. Humans encroach further into wild places each year. Technology makes it harder to hide what we are. Some packs have already been discovered, destroyed." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" "She's saying," Cale interjected, his voice tight with emotion. That some believe Elena's daughter might be the key to our survival. Others fear she might be the cause of our destruction. The baby stirred in Elena's arms, and for a moment, her eyes seemed to glow with the same inner light. Several pack members stepped back instinctively, but Vera leaned closer, fascination clear on her weathered features. She's listening, the elder woman murmured. Understanding more than she should. This is no ordinary child, Kyle. I know, Kyle said quietly. I felt it the moment she was born. The mate bond. It expanded to include her. She's connected to both Elena and me in ways I've never experienced. Derek scoffed. Impossible. Newborns don't form pack bonds. Newborns don't have mismatched eyes either, Vera pointed out. Perhaps it's time we accepted that this child operates by different rules. A third pack member, a woman with auburn hair and kind eyes, spoke up for the first time. The question isn't what she is, she said gently. It's what we do about it. The child needs protection, guidance. She needs a pack. She has a pack, Cale said firmly. She has me. And what about the human? Derek's tone was sharp, dismissive. She knows our secrets now. She's seen too much. Elena felt anger flare in her chest, hot and protective. The strange power that had awakened during the birth stirred again, responding to her emotions. I have a name, she said, her voice carrying an edge that made several pack members look at her with new attention. And I'm standing right here. Elena, Vera said thoughtfully, as if testing the name. From the Greek, meaning bright light. How appropriate. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Cale said, moving closer to Elena's side, that perhaps your arrival here wasn't as accidental as we thought. Before Elena could ask what he meant, her daughter made a soft sound. Not quite a cry, but a vocalization that carried an odd harmonic quality. All conversation stopped as the pack members stared at the baby, with expressions ranging from awe to terror. She's trying to communicate, Vera breathed. At less than 2 hours old, she's attempting to use pack speech. Pack speech? Elena looked between Cale and the elder woman. A form of communication unique to our kind, Cale explained. It develops in werewolf children around 6 months of age. If she's already attempting it, then she's far more advanced than any hybrid we've ever encountered, Vera finished. This child could indeed be the bridge between our worlds. Derek's expression darkened. Or she could be the weapon that destroys us all. Power without control, instinct without wisdom. What happens when she grows up? What happens when she reaches maturity and her abilities fully manifest? What happens, Elena said firmly, is that she'll have parents who love her and a pack that accepts her. She'll learn control and wisdom because we'll teach them to her. And if the pack doesn't accept her? Derek challenged. Elena felt the power inside her pulse in response to her rising anger. When she spoke, her voice carried a resonance that made the windows rattle. Then the pack will have made a very serious mistake. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena stared at Derek, matching his challenging gaze with one of her own, and she saw the moment he realized that she was no longer entirely human herself. Interesting, Vera murmured, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It seems the child isn't the only one who's been awakened tonight. Elena looked down at her daughter, who was watching the proceedings with those impossible eyes, and felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever they were becoming, whatever they had already become, they would face it together. So, she said, looking back at the assembled pack members. What happens now? Vera exchanged glances with the other pack members, some silent communication passing between them. When she looked back at Elena, her expression was thoughtful. Now, the elder woman said, we discover whether an old wolf pack is ready to be led into the future by a human mother and her prophesied child. The challenge in those words was unmistakable, but so was the possibility. Elena looked at Cale, saw the pride and love shining in his golden eyes, and felt her heart expand with hope. They had a long way to go, and many obstacles still to face. But for the first time since this strange night began, Elena believed they might actually have a chance at building something beautiful from the chaos. Her daughter cooed softly, and the sound carried an odd note of agreement, as if she too sensed the possibility stretching ahead of them like a path illuminated by moonlight. Chapter 8. Trials and Transformations. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities and ancient fears. Elena could feel the weight of generations pressing down on this moment. Pack laws written in blood and tradition, prophecies whispered around fires long since cold, and the terrible responsibility of change. There must be a formal assessment, Derek said finally, his voice tight with reluctance. If we're to accept this anomaly into the pack, proper protocols must be followed. She has a name, Elena said sharply, that strange new power humming in her voice. And she's not an anomaly. She's a little girl who deserves to be welcomed, not assessed like livestock. Vera held up a weathered hand, forestalling Derek's heated response. Peace, both of you. Derek speaks from law, Elena from love. Both have their place. The elder woman's eyes, ancient and knowing, fixed on Elena with surprising warmth. But perhaps there's a middle path that honors both. What kind of assessment? Kyle asked, moving closer to Elena's side. His protective instincts were clearly on high alert, and Elena could feel the tension radiating from his body. The old rituals, Derek replied. Present the child to the pack under the full moon. Let the spirits judge her worthiness. The next. Full moon is 3 weeks away, the auburn-haired woman interrupted gently. And this child was born during the storm of storms, under a new moon that carries its own power. Perhaps the traditional timing doesn't apply. Elena looked down at her daughter, who was watching the conversation with those extraordinary mismatched eyes. There was something almost amused in her expression, as if she found the adult's concerns quaint. What exactly would this assessment involve? Elena asked carefully. Vera stepped closer, her movements deliberate and respectful. May I? She asked, gesturing toward the baby. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Vera's hands were gentle as she examined. The infant, her touch carrying the wisdom of someone who had delivered dozens of children over the decades. Her pulse is strong, Vera murmured, pressing her ear to the baby's chest. Her breathing steady, but there's something else. She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. Her heartbeat has an unusual rhythm, almost like she's synchronizing with something beyond herself. Synchronizing with what? Kyle asked. Before Vera could answer, Elena felt it, a subtle shift. In the air, a pull that seemed to come from the very earth beneath their feet. Her daughter stirred in her arms, and suddenly Elena could hear what the elder woman meant. The baby's heartbeat wasn't just steady. It was keeping time with something larger, something that pulsed through the mountain itself. The land, Elena whispered, understanding flooding through her. She's connected to the land. Impossible, Derek scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Vera asked, her eyes bright with excitement. The old stories speak of children born to bridge worlds. What if that doesn't just mean human and werewolf, but mortal and eternal? What if she's connected to the spiritual heart of the territory itself? As if responding to Vera's words, Elena's daughter made that soft cooing sound again. And this time Elena felt an answering vibration from deep in the earth. The cabin's windows hummed in their frames, and every pack member present went perfectly still. She's calling to the land, the auburn-haired woman breathed. At less than 3 hours old, she's already establishing her claim to the territory. Elena, felt a surge of pride mixed with overwhelming responsibility. Her daughter wasn't just special, she was transformative, capable of reshaping the very foundations of pack society. "This changes everything," Vera said quietly. "A child who can commune with the land itself. She's not just prophesied, she's essential. The territory accepts her. That makes her claim stronger than bloodline, stronger even than pack law." Derek's face had gone pale. "You're suggesting we abandon thousands of years of tradition for an infant who can't even hold her own head up?" "I'm suggesting," Vera replied with steel in her voice, "that tradition serves the pack, not the other way around. And if the land itself recognizes this child's authority, then perhaps we should examine our assumptions about what makes a true alpha." Elena's eyes snapped to Kale, understanding dawning. "That's what you meant earlier, wasn't it? About her being the key to our survival. She's not just going to unite the packs, she's going to change how they work entirely." Kale nodded, slowly. "The old ways are failing, territories shrinking, packs scattered, our kind dwindling year by year. But a leader who can speak to the land itself, who carries the power of both worlds." He looked down at Elena's daughter with something approaching reverence. "She could restore what we've lost, could give us a future we thought was impossible." The baby chose that moment to open her eyes fully, and Elena gasped. The green eye and gold eye weren't just mismatched anymore, they were glowing, each with its own inner light. And when she looked directly at Derek, her tiny mouth curved in what could only be described as a smile. Derek stumbled backward, his face a mask of shock and something that might have been awe. She looked at me, really looked, like she could see straight through to my soul." "Because she can," Vera said simply. "The question is, what did she see there?" Before Derek could answer, Elena felt another shift, not in the earth this time, but in herself. The power that had been building since the birth suddenly focused, sharpening like a blade. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to shimmer. "Enough," she said, and every person present turned to look at her with expressions of startled respect. "My daughter isn't here to be tested or judged. She's here to be loved and protected and guided as she grows into whatever she's meant to become. If this pack can offer that, wonderful. If not, we'll find another way." The authority in her voice was undeniable, and Elena realized with a start that she wasn't just defending her child, she was claiming her own place in this supernatural hierarchy. Whatever power had awakened in her during the birth, it wasn't submissive or dependent. It was commanding, maternal, and absolutely immovable when it came to her daughter's welfare. "Elena," Vera said softly, "do you understand what you've just done?" "I've protected my child," Elena replied without hesitation. "You've issued an alpha challenge," Derek said, his voice tight with disbelief. "A human woman, barely 3 hours after giving birth, just challenged the fundamental authority structure of our pack." Elena looked at Kale, seeing pride and love, and something that might have been relief in his golden eyes. "Is that what I did?" "You claimed your place," Kale said quietly. "As my mate, as mother to a prophesied child, and as someone the land itself has touched with power. You have every right to do so. And what does that mean exactly?" Vera's weathered face broke into a smile that transformed her entire appearance. "It means, child, that you've just established yourself as a force to be reckoned with. Alpha female. To Kale's alpha male, mother to a daughter who may reshape our entire world." Elena felt her daughter's tiny hand curl against her chest, and she looked down to find those extraordinary eyes watching her with what could only be described as approval. In that moment, she understood that this was what had been building all along, not just her daughter's birth, but her own transformation from frightened, abandoned human to something far more powerful. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Vera said, glancing around at the assembled pack members, We see if this old pack is ready to follow where you and your remarkable family choose to lead." The challenge was issued, the gauntlet thrown down. Elena looked from face to face, reading acceptance in some eyes, uncertainty in others, but no longer the fear and hostility that had greeted her arrival. They had crossed some invisible threshold tonight, moved from confrontation to possibility. Whatever came next, she and Cale and their extraordinary daughter would face it together, as a family that had already begun to reshape the supernatural world simply by existing. The storm outside had finally begun to quiet, but Elena could feel that they were only in the eye of a much larger tempest, one that would determine not just their own fate, but the future of every supernatural being who still called the wild places home. Chapter 9. The Choice of Pack and Heart. The silence that followed Vera's challenge stretched taut as a bowstring. Elena could feel the weight of decision pressing down on everyone present, the gravity of choices that would reshape not just their small group, but potentially the entire supernatural world. "There's something else," Derek said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Something none of you have considered." All eyes turned to him, and Elena felt a prickle of unease at the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "What are you thinking, Derek?" Cale's voice carried a warning. "Marcus," Derek said simply. "The father of this child. We all know what happened to him, but do we know why his former pack was so desperate to find him?" Elena felt ice form in her veins. "What are you talking about?" Derek's eyes met hers, and she saw something that might have been sympathy beneath the hard exterior. Marcus wasn't just any outcast wolf, Elena. He was the heir to the Black Fang pack, one of the most powerful and ruthless territories in the northern region. When he disappeared, when he abandoned his responsibilities to be with you, it didn't just break pack law, it broke a treaty. The baby stirred in Elena's arms, and she could have sworn she felt her daughter's distress through their newfound connection. Cale had gone completely still beside her, his entire body radiating dangerous tension. "What kind of treaty?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "A marriage alliance," Derek continued relentlessly. Marcus was promised to the daughter of the Silver Moon Pack. Their union was meant to prevent a territorial war that's been brewing for decades. When he ran, Derek shrugged. Both packs blamed each other for his disappearance. The conflict escalated. "How do you know all this?" Vera demanded. "Because 3 weeks ago, we received an ultimatum," Derek replied. "Find Marcus and return him for judgment, or face the consequences of harboring a treaty breaker." Elena felt the world tilt around her. "You knew," she whispered, looking at Cale. "When you found me, when you brought me here, you knew who my baby's father was." Cale's jaw tightened, and she saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. "I suspected. The timing, the description Marcus gave me, the way he spoke about you. When you appeared on that road, I knew for certain. And you didn't think to tell me that my daughter and I are apparently targets of some supernatural war." Elena's voice carried that new harmonic power, making the windows rattle again. "I wanted to protect you," Cale said quietly. "From the truth, from the fear, from the impossible choices." "That wasn't your decision to make," Elena snapped, and this time her daughter responded to her emotional surge with a soft cry that seemed to echo with otherworldly resonance. The sound cut through Elena's anger like a blade, and she immediately felt her daughter's distress echoing through their bond. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to calm down. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she murmured to the baby, gently rocking her. "Mama's not angry at you." But when she looked back at Cale, her eyes were hard as flint. "We'll discuss this later. Right now, I need to know exactly what kind of danger we're in." Derek exchanged glances with Vera before continuing. "The Black Fang pack has been searching for any trace of Marcus for months. If they discover he had a child..." They'll either want to claim her as their heir, Vera finished grimly, or eliminate her as a threat to their succession. Elena felt her blood run cold. She's just a baby. She's a baby with a legitimate claim to one of the most powerful territories in the region, Derek pointed out. In the supernatural world, that makes her incredibly valuable. Or incredibly dangerous. The auburn-haired woman spoke up for the first time in several minutes. There's another consideration, she said softly. If the Black Fang Pack discovers that their heir's child is the prophesied bridge builder, they won't just want to claim her, they'll want to control her, use her power for their own expansion. Elena looked down at her daughter, this tiny being, who had already endured so much in her few hours of life. The baby's mismatched eyes were watching her with that uncanny awareness, and Elena felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her that had nothing human about it. "Over my dead body," she said quietly, and the words carried such absolute conviction that several pack members stepped back involuntarily. "That's exactly what they'll arrange if you try to fight them alone," Derek said bluntly. "The Black Fang Pack doesn't negotiate, they don't compromise. They take what they want by force." "Then, what do you suggest?" Elena asked, though she could see the answer forming in Derek's eyes. "Give her up," he said simply. "Let them have the child. It's the only way to keep both packs safe from their retribution." The silence that followed was absolute. Elena stared at Derek, unable to process what he'd just suggested. Around her, she could feel the shock radiating from the other pack members, the way they collectively recoiled from his words. "No," Elena said finally, her voice deadly quiet. "Elena, be reasonable." "No." This time her voice shook the entire cabin, and Elena realized with a start that her power wasn't just responding to her emotions anymore, it was responding to her will. "I will not give up my daughter to appease some territorial dispute that started before she was even born." Kel moved closer to her side, his own power beginning to manifest as a low, warning growl that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his throat. "Anyone who tries to take her will answer to both of us. And me," Vera said firmly, stepping forward to stand with them. "The child is under pack protection." "And me," the auburn-haired woman added, moving to join their small group. Derek looked around at the shifting allegiances, his expression growing desperate. "You're all being fools. You're risking everything for one child." "We're protecting our future," Vera corrected sharply. "This child represents hope for our kind. If we abandon her to wolves like the Black Fang Pack, we abandon any chance of real change." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes, not from fear, but from overwhelming gratitude. These people, these supernatural beings she'd known for mere hours, were willing to risk their lives for her daughter's freedom. "There has to be another way," she said, looking around at their faces. "Some solution that doesn't involve war or surrender." Kale's hand found hers, and she felt strength flow between them through their mate bond. "There is," he said quietly. "But you're not going to like it." "What?" "We leave," Kale said simply. "All of us. We take the pack and relocate to neutral territory. Start fresh somewhere the Black Fang Pack has no claim." Derek laughed bitterly. "And abandon the lands our families have protected for generations. Give up everything we've built here?" "To save everything we might become," Kale replied steadily. "Sometimes the greatest act of courage is knowing when to let go of the past." Elena looked down at her daughter, who was watching the conversation, with those extraordinary eyes. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw approval in that tiny face, as if even at a few hours old, her daughter understood the weight of the choices being made on her behalf. "What if there's a third option?" Elena said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "What are you thinking?" Vera asked. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the power inside her coalesce into something like certainty. "What if we don't run, and we Don't surrender. What if we fight, but not the way they expect? Elena. Kale's voice carried a warning. No, listen to me, Elena said, her voice gaining strength. Derek said the Black Fang Pack doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise. But what if they didn't have a choice? What if we made ourselves too powerful, to ignore, too valuable to destroy? She looked around at the assembled pack members, seeing the curiosity beginning to overcome their fear. My daughter isn't just prophesied, Elena continued. She's connected to the land itself. She could give any pack that protects her an advantage no territorial dispute could overcome. We don't just offer them a treaty. We offer them evolution. The silence that followed was thoughtful, rather than shocked. Elena could practically see the wheels turning in their minds, the possibilities taking shape. It's audacious, Vera said finally. Dangerous beyond measure, but it might work, the auburn-haired woman added quietly. Elena felt her daughter's tiny hand curl against her chest, and she knew with absolute certainty that this was the path they had to take. Not surrender, not flight, but transformation, on their own terms. Then we have a plan, she said firmly. Now we just have to survive long enough to implement it. Chapter 10. The Test of Fire. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and quite possibly suicidal, which was why Elena was surprised when the pack began to rally around it with something approaching enthusiasm. As dawn broke over the mountains, transforming the storm-ravaged landscape into something ethereal and beautiful, the cabin filled with the quiet energy of people preparing for war. The Black Fang Pack will expect us to run or hide, Vera explained, spreading a hand-drawn map across the kitchen table. They won't anticipate a direct challenge, especially not from a human mother and a newborn child. Elena adjusted her daughter in her arms, marveling at how alert the baby remained despite having been born only hours ago. Those mismatched eyes tracked every movement, every speaker, as if she were cataloging information for future use. What exactly are we challenging them to? Elena asked, studying the territorial boundaries marked on the map. A formal claiming, Kale said, his voice tight with concern. It's an ancient right, rarely invoked, but still recognized by pack law. Your daughter, as Marcus's heir, can formally claim leadership of the Black Fang territory. She's a baby, Elena pointed out. How can a baby claim leadership of anything? Through her guardian, Vera explained. You, as her mother and protector, would speak for her until she comes of age. But Elena... The elder woman's expression was grave. If the challenge is rejected, if they refuse to honor the old laws, it means war. Not just with our pack, but with every territory that still respects the ancient ways. Elena felt her daughter's tiny hand curl against her chest, and through their strange connection, she sensed something that might have been encouragement, or perhaps determination. There's something else, the auburn-haired woman said quietly. Elena had learned her name was Sarah, and she served as the pack's historian. The claiming ritual requires a demonstration of power. The challenger must prove they can protect and provide for the territory they seek to claim. What kind of demonstration? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Combat, Derek said bluntly. He'd been quiet since his suggestion to surrender the baby had been so decisively rejected, but now he stepped forward with obvious reluctance. Single combat between the challenger's champion and the current pack leader. Kyle's entire body went rigid. Absolutely not. It's the law, Derek continued. Ancient, unbreakable, and non-negotiable. If Elena claims the territory for her daughter, someone has to fight for that claim. Then I'll do it, Elena said simply. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Every person in the room was staring at her as if she'd suggested flying to the moon. Elena, Kale said carefully, you gave birth 6 hours ago. You're human. You have no combat training, no experience with pack dynamics. I have something better, Elena interrupted, feeling that strange power pulse through her veins. I have everything to lose and nothing left to fear. It's impossible, Derek said, flatly. Garrett Blackfang is one of the most skilled fighters in the Northern Territories. He's been pack leader for 15 years and he's never lost a challenge. Then perhaps it's time his luck changed, Elena replied, with a calm that surprised even her. Vera was studying her with those ancient, knowing eyes. You feel it, don't you? The power that awakened when your daughter was born. It's not just maternal instinct anymore. Elena nodded slowly. I can feel everything. The heartbeat of the land, the pulse of every living thing in these mountains. When I speak, reality seems to bend around my words. She looked down at her daughter, who was watching, her with those extraordinary eyes. She's changing me, making me into something that can protect her. Even if that's true, Kale said desperately, combat isn't just about power. It's about skill, experience, the ability to think strategically while someone is trying to kill you. Elena met his golden eyes, seeing the fear there, the desperate love that made him want to shield her from every danger. Then teach me, she said simply. In what? 6 hours before we have to leave for the challenge. Kale's voice cracked slightly. Elena, please, let me do this. I'm Alpha. I'm trained for combat. You can't, Sarah interrupted gently. Pack law is specific. The challenge must come from the claimant or their direct representative. Elena is her daughter's mother and guardian. You're neither. But I'm her mate, Kyle protested. A bond that isn't recognized by traditional pack law, Derek pointed out with brutal honesty. Mate bonds between human and werewolf aren't legally binding in most territories. Elena felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. Then, we'll have to change that too, won't we? Before anyone could respond, a new sound reached them from outside, the rumble of vehicles approaching on the mountain road. Elena felt her daughter stiffen in her arms, and through their connection, she sensed a warning that made her blood run cold. They're here, she whispered. Kale was at the window in an instant, his body language screaming danger. 3 vehicles, military grade, at least a dozen people. The Blackfang pack doesn't waste time, Vera said grimly. They must have been tracking us all night. Elena stood slowly, her daughter cradled protectively against her chest. The power that had been building inside her all night suddenly focused, sharpening like a blade being honed. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Then we meet them on our terms, not theirs. She walked to the front door with measured steps, ignoring the protests of the pack members behind her. Kale caught up to her just as she reached for the handle. Elena, wait. Let me— No, she said firmly, turning to face him. I appreciate everything you've done for me, for us. But this moment, this is mine. She reached up to cup his face with her free hand, feeling the mate bond pulse between them like electricity. I love you, Kale Blackwood. I love you for saving me, for protecting me, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, but I won't hide behind you. Not anymore. Kale's eyes searched her face, and she saw the moment he recognized the change in her. Not just the supernatural power, but the absolute certainty, the transformation from victim to warrior. I love you too, he said quietly. Which is why I'm going to stand beside you, not in front of you. Elena smiled, feeling something warm and fierce bloom in her chest. Together then. Together. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch, her daughter calm and alert in her arms. The vehicles had stopped in the clearing in front of the cabin, and figures were emerging from them. Tall, powerful, moving with the fluid grace that marked them as supernatural predators. The man who stepped forward from the lead vehicle was clearly the pack leader. Tall and broad-shouldered, With graying hair and scars that spoke of countless battles, he radiated the kind of authority that had been earned through blood and dominance. "Garrett Blackfang," Cale said quietly behind her. Elena studied the man who represented everything she was fighting against. The old ways, the rigid hierarchy, the belief that power came only through violence and fear. When he looked at her, his expression was dismissive, as if she were barely worth his attention. "You have something that belongs to me," Garrett called across the clearing, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Elena stepped to the edge of the porch, her daughter's weight warm and reassuring in her arms. When she replied, her voice carried across the clearing with supernatural clarity. "I have my daughter," she said simply, "and she belongs to no one but herself." Garrett's expression darkened. "The child carries Blackfang blood. That makes her our responsibility." "The child carries her father's blood," Elena corrected, "and her father chose love over duty, freedom over fear. She inherits that choice, not your claim." Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that a human would dare speak to him with such authority. He took a step closer, and Elena felt every muscle in her body coil with readiness. "Brave words from someone who doesn't understand the forces at play here," Garrett said. "Return the child willingly, and your pack will be spared the consequences of harboring stolen property." Elena felt her daughter stir against her chest, and through their bond, she sensed something that felt like agreement, support. As if even at a few hours old, her daughter was ready to face whatever came next. "Understand more than you think," Elena replied, power beginning to gather around her like a visible aura, "and I have a counter-proposal." She stepped down from the porch, moving into the clearing with Cale at her side and her pack arrayed behind her. The morning sun caught her daughter's mismatched eyes, making them seem to glow with inner fire. "Formally challenge your claim to leadership of the Blackfang territory," Elena announced, her voice carrying across the mountains with supernatural force. "My daughter is Marcus's heir, and I speak for her right to rule." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Garrett began to laugh, a sound devoid of humor and full of cruel amusement. "A human challenges me?" he said incredulously. "A woman who gave birth hours ago thinks she can claim territory through combat?" Elena felt her daughter's tiny hand press against her heart, and suddenly she understood. This wasn't about proving her strength to Garrett. This was about proving to herself, to her daughter, to the world, that some things were worth fighting, for regardless of the odds. "I don't think I can claim it," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had found their purpose. "I know I will." Chapter 11. The combat of souls. The challenge hung in the air between them like a blade suspended by the thinnest thread. Elena could feel the weight of every gaze upon her. Garrett's cruel amusement, her pack's mixture of pride and terror, Cale's desperate love warring with his fear for her safety. "Very well," Garrett said finally, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you wish to die for your foolish pride, I'll accommodate you. But know this. When you fall, your child becomes mine regardless. Blackfang blood returns to Blackfang territory." Elena felt her daughter shift against her chest, and through their mysterious connection, she sensed something that felt like fierce disagreement. Even at a few hours old, her child was already rejecting Garrett's claim with supernatural certainty. "The combat will be held at noon," Garrett continued, consulting an expensive watch. "That gives you 3 hours to prepare for your death." "The combat will be held now," Elena corrected, her voice carrying that otherworldly resonance that made the air shimmer. "I won't have my daughter's fate hanging in uncertainty any longer than necessary." Garrett's eyebrows rose. "Eager to die, are we?" "Eager to live," Elena replied simply. "On my terms, in my time, protecting what matters most." She turned to Sarah, who had followed them outside with the rest of the pack. "Is there a specific ritual? Words that need to be spoken?" Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined. "The ancient forms must be observed. Both parties state their claim. Witnesses acknowledge the legitimacy of the challenge and—" She swallowed hard. "And the combat continues until one party yields or dies." Elena felt Cale's sharp intake of breath behind her, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't afford to see the fear in his eyes, couldn't let his terror become her weakness. "I call upon the old laws," Elena announced, her voice carrying across the clearing with supernatural force. "I am Elena Moreau, mother and guardian to the heir of Marcus Blackfang. I claim the right of challenge for leadership of the Blackfang territory. I am Garrett Blackfang, rightful leader of my territory," Garrett responded, his voice booming, with practiced authority. "I accept your challenge, and will defend my claim with blood and honor." The ritual words seemed to awaken something in the land itself. Elena felt the earth pulse beneath her feet, felt the attention of ancient powers, focusing on this moment. Around the clearing, both packs formed a circle, creating the sacred space where the challenge would be decided. "Elena," Cale said quietly, moving to her side. "Let me hold her. During the combat, I mean." Elena looked down at her daughter, whose mismatched eyes were watching the proceedings with that uncanny awareness. For a moment, she hesitated. The thought of being separated from her child, even temporarily, made every protective instinct she possessed scream in protest. But then she felt it. A gentle push through their bond, her daughter's strange way of saying it was okay, that she understood the necessity. "Take care of her," Elena whispered, carefully transferring the baby to Cale's arms. The moment their connection was broken, she felt hollow, incomplete, as if part of her soul had been severed. But almost immediately, another kind of strength rushed in to fill the void. The power that had been building since the birth, focused and sharpened, no longer filtered through maternal gentleness. This was raw, primal, the fury of a mother whose child had been threatened. "You still have time to reconsider," Garrett said, beginning to remove his shirt. "I've killed challengers before. I take no pleasure in slaughtering the defenseless." Elena began to unbutton her own shirt, revealing a tank top beneath. Her body still ached from childbirth, still felt foreign and unfamiliar. But beneath the surface, power hummed like electricity in her veins. "I'm not defenseless," she said quietly. "I'm motivated." Garrett's expression shifted as he caught sight of her arms, where there should have been the soft flesh of a woman who'd spent her life in offices and coffee shops. Elena's muscles were lean and defined, as if the supernatural awakening had reshaped her very bones. "Interesting," he murmured. "The legends spoke of humans who could be enhanced by contact with our kind. I thought they were myths." "A lot of things you thought were myths are about to become very real," Elena replied, settling into a fighting stance that felt natural despite her complete lack of training. The circle of witnesses fell silent. Elena could feel Cale's anguish, through their mate bond, could sense her daughter's strange calm from across the clearing. But most of all, she could feel the land itself watching, waiting, as if the very mountains held their breath. Garrett moved first, crossing the distance, between them with inhuman speed. His hand, partially shifted into claws, swept toward her throat with lethal precision. Elena moved without thinking, her body responding with reflexes she'd never possessed. She ducked under his strike and spun away, feeling the wind from his. "Claws brush her cheek, faster than expected," Garrett acknowledged, circling her like a predator. "But speed won't save you when I stop playing." He lunged again, this time with the full weight of his supernatural strength behind the attack. Elena met him head-on, and the impact when their bodies collided sent shockwaves through the clearing. But she didn't fall. Instead, she grappled with him, her hands finding pressure points she shouldn't have known existed. her body moving with a grace and power that defied everything she'd believed about herself. "Impossible," Garrett snarled, breaking away from her grip. "You're human. You can't match a werewolf's strength." "I'm not matching it," Elena replied, power gathering around her like visible heat. "I'm exceeding it." This time she attacked first, moving with speed that blurred the edges of reality. Her fist connected with Garrett's jaw, sending him staggering backward. Before he could recover, she was on him again, strikes flowing in combinations that seemed choreographed by instinct rather than training. But Garrett was no ordinary opponent. 15 years of leadership hadn't been won through luck. He adapted, quickly, using his greater experience to counter her raw power with technique and strategy. His claws raked across her ribs, drawing blood and sending fire through her nervous system. Elena stumbled, gasping, and Garrett pressed his advantage with ruthless efficiency. "You fight well for an amateur," he said, driving her backward toward the edge of the circle. "But you lack the killer instinct. You still think like prey." Elena felt her back hit the wall of witnesses, felt the certainty of defeat closing around her like a noose. Through the mate bond, she could feel Cale's desperation, his desire to break protocol and help her. But then she heard it. A soft sound from across the clearing. Her daughter, making that strange cooing noise that carried harmonics no human baby should possess. The sound cut through Elena's pain and fear like a beacon, reminding her of what she was fighting for. Not territory, not pride, but the right of her child to grow up free from the tyranny of those who would use her gifts for their own ends. Power exploded through Elena's system, raw and untamed. When she looked up at Garrett, her eyes were no longer entirely human. They held depths that reflected the ancient connection to land and spirit that her daughter had awakened in her. "You're right," she said, pushing herself away from the circle of witnesses. "I don't think like prey." Her voice carried harmonics that made the ground beneath their feet vibrate. Around the clearing, witnesses stepped back involuntarily as reality seemed to bend around her words. "I think like a mother protecting her young, and there's nothing in this world or any other more dangerous than that." Garrett's expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty as he sensed the change in her. The woman he'd been fighting was gone, replaced by something primal and implacable. Elena moved toward him with deliberate steps, and with each footfall, the earth seemed to respond. Power crackled in the air around her, and for the first time since the combat began, Garrett looked genuinely afraid. "What are you?" he whispered. Elena smiled, and it was not entirely human. "I'm what happens when you threaten the wrong child." The final phase of their battle was about to begin, and Elena could feel destiny gathering around them like a storm. Everything her daughter would become, everything their family could achieve, hung in the balance of the next few moments. But for the first time since this all began, Elena was no longer afraid. She was exactly where she was meant to be, fighting for exactly what mattered most, and she was going to win. Chapter 12. The new dawn, the final moments of the combat passed in a blur of supernatural fury and primal determination. Elena moved like a force of nature unleashed, her strikes carrying the weight of mountains, her voice resonating with harmonics that made reality itself bend to her will. Garrett, for all his experience and strength, found himself outmatched by something that transcended the boundaries between human and werewolf. When the dust settled, when the echoes of their final clash faded into the mountain air, Garrett lay, on his back in the center of the sacred circle, Elena's hand pressed to his throat. But instead of claws or fangs, she held him with the gentle pressure of someone who had already won and felt no need to destroy what had been defeated. "Yield," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the clearing with supernatural clarity. "Your pack deserves a leader who understands that strength comes from protecting the innocent, not exploiting them." Garrett stared up at her, his eyes wide with something between fear and awe. "What are you?" he whispered again. I'm the future, Elena replied simply. The bridge between what was and what could be. And I'm offering you the chance to be part of that future, instead of an obstacle to it. The silence that followed was profound. Around the sacred circle, members of both packs stood frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A human woman, a mother who had given birth hours earlier, had not only fought one of the most powerful pack leaders in the Northern Territories, but had emerged victorious through means none of them fully understood. I yield, Garrett said, finally, his voice carrying across the clearing. I acknowledge Elena Moreau as the rightful claimant to Black Fang territory. The formal words of surrender broke the spell that had held everyone motionless. From across the clearing, Elena heard her daughter's soft coo, and the sound drew her like a beacon. She released Garrett and moved toward Cale, who was standing, with their child in his arms, his face a mixture of pride, relief, and overwhelming love. Is it over? Elena asked as she reached them, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion crashing over her now that the adrenaline was fading. It's over, Cale confirmed, carefully transferring their daughter back to her arms. The moment the baby settled against her chest, Elena felt whole again, the hollow ache of separation instantly filled. But as she looked around at the assembled packs, at the mixture of awe and uncertainty in their faces, she realized that while one battle was over, another was just beginning. What happens now? She asked Vera, who had approached with tears shining in her ancient eyes. Now, the elder woman said softly, we discover what kind of leader you choose to become. Elena looked down at her daughter, whose mismatched eyes were watching her with that uncanny awareness. Through their bond, she felt something that might have been approval, or perhaps anticipation. I don't want to rule through fear, Elena said, addressing not just Vera but both packs. I don't want to perpetuate the old cycles of dominance and submission. If I'm going to lead these territories, it will be by building something new, something that honors both tradition and progress. Garrett had risen to his feet, brushing dirt from his clothes with as much dignity as he could manage. Pretty words, he said, though there was no longer any hostility in his voice. But leadership isn't about intentions. It's about results. Then judge me by my results, Elena replied calmly. Give me a year. Let me show you what's possible when strength serves compassion instead of conquering it. She turned to address both packs directly, her voice carrying that supernatural resonance that made her words impossible to ignore. I know I'm not what any of you expected. I'm human, or I was until a few hours ago. I don't know all your customs, all your laws, all the intricate politics that have shaped your world for generations. But I know what it feels like to be abandoned, to be judged by circumstances beyond my control, to be told that who I am isn't enough. Elena felt her daughter's tiny hand curl against her heart, and she drew strength from that simple touch. My daughter will grow up in a world where her mixed heritage is seen as a gift, not a burden. Where the supernatural and human communities work together instead of hiding from each other. Where strength is measured by how well you protect those who can't protect themselves, not by how thoroughly you dominate them. And if we refuse? Derek asked, though his tone carried more curiosity than challenge. Elena met his eyes steadily. Then you're free to leave. I won't hold anyone here who doesn't want to be part of what we're building, but I also won't let anyone destroy it out of fear or prejudice. The power that had carried her through the combat was still there, humming beneath her skin like electricity, and Elena knew that she could enforce her will if necessary, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. I have a question, Sarah said, stepping forward with scholarly curiosity. The prophecies spoke of a child who would bridge worlds, but they also spoke of a guardian who would prepare the way. Is it possible that you're both, the guardian and the mother of the prophesied one? Elena considered that, feeling the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders like a cloak. I don't know, she said honestly. I only know that I'll spend every day of my life making sure my daughter has the freedom to become whatever she's meant to be. Kyle moved to stand beside her, his hand finding her free one and intertwining their fingers. Our daughter, he corrected, gently. And our responsibility. Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the simple possessive pronoun. In all the chaos and conflict, she'd almost forgotten the most important truth of all. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a mate who loved her, a child who needed her, and now apparently 2 packs who were willing to follow her into an uncertain but hopeful future. Our daughter, she agreed, squeezing his hand. Our family. Our pack. Vera approached them, with something that looked like a ceremonial knife, its blade gleaming with symbols that seemed to shift and move in the morning light. There's one more ritual, the elder woman said gently. If you're truly claiming leadership of both territories, the bond must be sealed. You must mark yourself as Alpha and accept the responsibilities that come with that title. Elena looked at the blade, understanding instinctively what was being asked of her. A blood oath, a commitment that would bind her to the land and the people she'd sworn to protect. Will it hurt her? She asked, indicating her daughter. It will strengthen the connection between you, Vera replied. Your leadership will be bound to her well-being, and hers to yours. It's not a burden, Elena. It's a safeguard. Elena nodded and held out her free hand. The knife's edge was sharp enough that she barely felt the cut, but the moment her blood touched the earth, she felt something fundamental shift inside her. The power that had awakened during the birth settled deeper, becoming part of her bones, her breath, her heartbeat. Around the clearing, she felt the acknowledgement of both packs. Not submission, but acceptance. They would follow her not because they had to, but because they chose to believe in the vision she offered. It's done, Vera said softly. You are Alpha of the combined territories. May you lead with wisdom and strength. Elena felt her daughter stir against her chest, and when she looked down, she found those extraordinary mismatched eyes watching her with what could only be described as pride. Through their bond, she felt a wave of contentment, as if even at a few hours old, her daughter understood that the world had just become a safer place for her to grow up in. What do we do first? Kyle asked, his voice warm with affection and anticipation. Elena looked around at the faces surrounding them, some uncertain, some hopeful, all waiting for her to show them the way forward. She thought about the scared, abandoned woman who had driven into the storm less than 24 hours ago, and marveled at how completely her life had been transformed. First, she said, feeling a smile tug at the corners of her mouth, we go home. All of us. And then we start building the kind of world where our daughter can be exactly who she's meant to be. As the 2 packs began to disperse, talking quietly, among themselves about logistics and changes and the unprecedented turn their lives had taken, Elena remained in the center of the clearing with Kale and their daughter. The storm had passed. The sun was climbing toward its zenith, and everything felt possible. I love you, Kale said softly, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. I love you too, Elena replied, meaning it with every fiber of her transformed being. Their daughter cooed again, that strange harmonious sound that seemed to carry the promise of all the wonders yet to come. Elena closed her eyes and let herself feel, just for a moment, the perfect piece of a family complete and a future bright with unlimited possibility. The real work would begin tomorrow. Tonight, they would simply be together, learning what it meant to be a family blessed by destiny and bound by love stronger than any supernatural force. And that, Elena thought, as she felt her daughter's heartbeat sync with her own, was the most magical thing of all.